Monday came in cold and quiet. I wore my best shirt that morning, not because I had planned anything special, but because quarterly strategy meetings always felt like performances. The kind where everyone dressed sharply and pretended the numbers didn't keep them awake at night. I arrived at the office at 7:43 a.m. Early, as always. I set up the projector, arranged the printed reports, and triple-checked every slide in my presentation. 6 years of habit don't disappear overnight. By 9:07 a.m., the entire department had settled into the long conference room. My boss, Craig Holden, sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes moving slowly across the room like he was already measuring something. I stood at the front and began. I had barely reached the third slide when Craig raised his hand. "Stop," he said flatly. I stopped. He leaned back in his chair and looked around the room, not at me, but at everyone else. Like he needed witnesses for what was about to happen. "Your performance this past quarter shows serious decline," he said. "This company needs elite operators. Not passengers." A pause. Then his eyes settled on me. "You're done. Pack your things. Today." Nobody moved. Nobody made a sound. As the security guard appeared at the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Caller ID, Harmon Group. I sat in my car for what felt like a long time. The parking lot was still and gray. A pale winter sun hung above the building I had just been walked out of. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, both hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing slowly, trying to understand what had just happened. The call from Harmon Group had gone to voicemail. I hadn't answered it. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A text from Kevin, a junior analyst on my team. "You okay?" Also, he just told the whole room he built the Harmon account himself. Said he personally managed that relationship from the very start. I read the message twice. Then a third time. Craig had fired me in front of my entire department. And now, before I had even reached my car, he was already erasing my name from 6 years of work. I sat with that for a moment. Then I opened my email, not for any specific reason, just because I needed something familiar to do. There it was. Sent at 11:47 p.m. the night before. An email from Alan Harmon, CEO of Harmon Group. Subject line, "We need to talk about Craig. Urgent." My hands stopped moving. My name is Jordan Blake. And before that Monday morning, I had spent 6 years building something I believed was mine. I was the one who had landed Harmon Group. Not Craig. Not the team. Me. It took 42 cold calls. 42 rejections, near rejections, and politely ended conversations before Alan Harmon finally agreed to a meeting. I had driven 40 minutes to their offices, prepared a custom proposal, and sat across from Alan for 2 hours without blinking. I signed them 3 weeks later. They became the company's biggest account. After that, I built every campaign from the ground up. I rewrote broken strategies, brought in contractors when our internal team ran thin, and once worked through Christmas Eve to meet a client deadline. Nobody asked me to. I did it because the work mattered. I trained the junior analysts on my team, including Kevin. I was the first person in the office most mornings and often the last one to leave. I missed birthdays. I skipped vacations. I rescheduled holidays twice in 1 year because a campaign needed a final push. And every quarter, the numbers went up. I wasn't declining. I had been carrying the weight of that department for years. Which is why Alan Harmon's email, sent at midnight on a Sunday, made my pulse quicken. I didn't respond to Alan's email right away. I reread it twice, set my phone down, and then dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. "Jordan," he said. His voice was steady, but there was tension underneath it. "Alan," I said. "I got your email. I'm sorry I'm calling instead of replying, today has been a difficult one. I heard, he said quietly. I paused. You heard? Word travels. But I need to ask you directly, are you still handling our account? There it was. The question I had been bracing for since I sat in the parking lot. No, I said. I was let go this morning. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Jordan, Alan finally said, when Craig stepped in last month and overrode the campaign strategy one had personally approved, the one you built, we lost a significant portion of revenue. I assumed it was a market shift. I wanted to reach you before I called anyone else. My stomach tightened. That strategy change was not my decision, I said. I wasn't consulted. Another silence. Longer this time. Then. If you weren't there to protect this account, Alan said, we wouldn't stay. That afternoon, I opened my laptop. I wasn't sure exactly what I planned to do with the information Alan had given me. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I had never been built that way. But 2 years earlier, after Craig had begun taking credit for work he hadn't done, in meetings I hadn't been invited to, I had started doing something quiet and careful. I documented everything. Not obsessively. Not with anger. Just with precision. Every performance report I had submitted. Every revenue increase tied directly to my campaigns. Every email chain where a strategy had been approved with my name on it. Every internal memo showing the numbers rising under my leadership. I had saved them all in a private folder, backed up in 2 separate places. I looked at those files now. 12 organized folders. Hundreds of documents. 2 years of careful, undramatic record-keeping. There was something almost peaceful about looking at them. I had not collected this information to destroy anyone. I had done it to protect myself, because working under Craig had taught me early that when things went wrong, someone always needed to be blamed. And I had decided, quietly, that it would not be me. I closed the laptop. Then I picked up my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in almost a year. Leon Foster. Leon answered on the first ring. Jordan Blake, he said. There was a smile in his voice. I was wondering when you'd call. Leon had left the company 8 months ago. He had spent years building relationships across the industry and then, quietly and without drama, walked out and started his own boutique consultancy. Small team. Focused work. Clients who valued precision over flash. I had respected him for it at the time. Now I understood it differently. I got let go this morning, I said. I know, he said. Kevin messaged me. Of course he had. Leon, I need to talk to you. Not to vent, I mean actually talk. I know that too, he said. Which is why I didn't wait for you to ask. Jordan, I've been building something for the past 8 months, and I've been looking for the right person. Not an employee. A partner. Equity included. I went still. I'm serious, he said. I've watched what you built at that company for years. That kind of work doesn't disappear when someone takes your badge. There's something else, I said. Harman Group may be ready to move. A brief pause. Then we need a meeting, Leon said. Wednesday. Can you make it? Tuesday night, I received something I hadn't been expecting. A former colleague who still worked at the company, someone I had briefly mentored 2 years earlier, sent me an audio file with no explanation attached. Just a short message, thought you should hear this. I pressed play. It was a recording of an internal meeting. Craig's voice was unmistakable. We trimmed some dead weight this week, he said, to what sounded like a small group. Light laughter followed. Someone asked about the Harman account transition. Craig's tone shifted into something almost bored. I'll handle it personally. I've always been the one carrying that relationship anyway. Blake was getting too comfortable. Started believing his own hype. More laughter. I listened to the whole thing twice. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't cautious. He believed, fully and without question, that he had won. That I was gone, the account would carry on, and that 6 years of my work would simply become his story to tell from that point forward. I set my phone on the kitchen table and looked at the wall for a moment. The next morning, I learned that Alan Harmon had formally requested a full financial performance review from the company, covering the past 18 months. Craig didn't know that yet. Wednesday morning arrived before I felt ready for it. I woke up early and spent 2 hours compiling documents before the scheduled Zoom call with Alan. Leon had already prepared the framework for our proposal, a formal offer for Harmon Group to transition their account to Blake and Foster Consultancy. But first, I needed to send something. I assembled a detailed report, revenue figures from the past 6 years broken down by quarter, tied directly to each campaign I had managed. Growth percentages. New revenue streams opened. Client satisfaction scores. All of it documented, timestamped, and supported by internal emails showing my name as lead on every major project. I sent it to Alan at 9:15 a.m. with a short note. For your records. I wanted the numbers to speak for themselves. Alan replied in under 10 minutes. Received. This is very helpful. We've been comparing our own internal data. What we're seeing is a sharp drop, an 18% decline in campaign performance. Beginning the month Craig started overriding approved strategies. We had blamed the market. We are no longer so sure. I forwarded the message to Leon immediately. He replied with 3 words. He just confirmed it. An hour later, Alan sent a second message. Can you prepare a confidential proposal? Please don't loop in your former company. The Wednesday Zoom call was scheduled for 2 p.m. Leon and I joined 10 minutes early. Our proposal was prepared and polished. We had rehearsed how to present it steadily, professionally, without making it feel like a calculated move, even though it was. Alan joined at exactly 2 p.m. 30 seconds later, another face appeared on the screen. Craig Holden. My chest tightened. Leon glanced at his camera. I kept my face completely still. Craig looked confident. He sat forward in his chair, suit jacket on, wearing the same expression he used in every meeting where he believed he had the advantage. Alan, he said, nodding easily. Good to connect. I think we can clear everything up today. Alan looked at him for a long moment without speaking. Craig, he said calmly, I'd like to walk through some numbers with you. Specifically, the performance data from the past 18 months. Craig's expression didn't shift yet. Of course. Happy to. Alan presented the data methodically. The 18% decline. The overridden campaigns. The revenue that had vanished without explanation. Craig's jaw tightened. He tried to redirect. He shifted the conversation. He said my name 3 times within 2 minutes. Alan waited until he finished. Then he looked directly at Craig. Effective immediately, we are placing this contract under formal review. I found out later what happened inside the company after that call ended. Budget allocations for the Harmon account were frozen by 4:30 p.m. The finance team, which had been quietly preparing reports for weeks, suddenly found themselves fielding questions they hadn't anticipated. 2 account managers Craig had assigned to Harmon under his restructuring plan were left without clear direction. Craig sent 3 emails in the hour following the call. I know this because Kevin, still working inside the company, kept me informed. The emails were not angry, they were frantic. He attempted to reach Alan directly. He tried Alan's assistant. He sent a message to the head of the legal department asking what a formal account review typically involved. Nobody responded quickly enough. By the end of Wednesday, the board had been briefed that one of the company's most valuable accounts had been placed under formal review. They immediately requested a written explanation from Craig, detailed and specific, to be submitted by Friday morning. That evening, Leon forwarded me an email. Subject line, Draft Partnership Agreement, Blake and Foster Consultancy. I opened it slowly and read every line. The terms were clear. The equity split was fair. Everything Leon had promised over the phone was there in writing, exactly as he had described it. I saved the document to the same private folder where I kept everything else that mattered. Thursday afternoon, I signed the agreement. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold beside me, the document open on my laptop, and I read every clause one final time before I moved the cursor to the signature line. It was a strange feeling, not the rush I had expected. Not triumph or giddy excitement. It was something quieter. Something that felt more like landing on solid ground after a long stretch of treading water. I thought about Monday morning. The way Craig had looked around the room before he looked at me. The way people had avoided my eyes as the security guard walked me toward the elevator. The way my presentation slides had remained frozen on the projector while everyone sat in silence. For days had passed since that moment. I moved the cursor. I typed my name. Jordan Blake. Leon called 2 minutes later. You signed? He asked. Just now, I said. Good, he said. Because Alan's team has been reviewing the proposal all afternoon. I think we're going to hear something before the end of the week. I looked out the window at the city moving below, indifferent and unaware of the quiet, significant thing that had just happened at a kitchen table in an apartment off the main road. Friday was coming. Friday arrived at 11:42 a.m. I know the exact time because I was mid-sentence in a call with Leon when my second line lit up. I recognized the notification sound first, a chime I had assigned to important contacts. It was from Harmon Group. I ended the call with Leon and opened the email. Subject line, Formal Termination of Service Agreement. I read through it slowly. It was precise and professionally worded. It cited documented performance concerns. It cited the unauthorized strategy overrides. It cited the revenue decline that had been confirmed by both parties during the Wednesday review. It referenced the formal process initiated 2 days earlier. At the bottom, under the list of copied recipients, I saw the names. Board of Directors. Legal Department. Craig Holden. I set my phone down on the desk. The contract was gone. A multi-million-dollar account, the account Craig had told my entire department he had personally built, had formally walked out the door. In writing. With the board and legal watching. I was still sitting with that when my phone rang again. Not an email. Not a text. An actual call. Craig Holden's name sat on my screen. I looked at it for a moment. Then I answered. You sabotaged this. His voice was sharp and barely controlled. You went behind my back and poisoned that relationship. Everything that account was. Everything you built, I said quietly. He kept going. This is going to cost the company millions, Jordan. You know what you did. You know exactly what this looks like from the outside. I let him finish. There was a pause. I think he expected me to defend myself. To argue. To get upset and give him something to push back against. I didn't. Craig, I said, you stood in front of my entire department last Monday and told them I wasn't built for high-level clients. He didn't respond. You told the whole room you built the Harmon account, I continued. You said I was declining. You laughed when you said it. Silence. The only thing I did, I said, was let the numbers speak. Alan Harmon made his own decision. A long pause followed. Heavy and unbroken. Then Craig's voice came back, flatter this time. Smaller. Stripped of everything it had carried an hour ago. Can we fix this? He asked. It was the question I hadn't expected. Not the phrasing of it, not the timing, not the tone underneath it. I held the phone for another moment. No, I said. And I hung up first. The following Monday, Alan Harmon made an announcement. It wasn't a formal press release, it was a post on Harmon Group's official LinkedIn page. Clean, deliberate, and professional. It announced a new strategic partnership with Blake and Foster Consultancy for the full management of Harmon Group's marketing and growth operations, effective immediately. It tagged Leon. It tagged me. By noon, the post had been shared across the industry. By evening, it had reached well beyond it. My phone buzzed consistently for most of that afternoon. Messages came from former colleagues, from contacts I hadn't spoken to in years, from people I had briefly crossed paths with at conferences and side projects. Some sent congratulations. Some asked questions. Some were simply curious about how it had all moved so quickly. And then there were the messages from people who had been sitting in the Monday morning conference room a week earlier. Kevin sent a long message. Others sent shorter ones, brief and carefully worded, as if they weren't sure I would reply. A few were apologies, though not all of them used that word directly. I read every message. I replied to most with something short and genuine. By the end of that day, I saw that the stock price of my former company had slipped. Not dramatically, but enough that people in the right positions noticed. The week after the announcement moved in slow motion. I watched, mostly from a distance, through messages from Kevin and a few others still inside, as the effects rippled steadily through the company. 2 senior employees submitted resignation letters within 4 days of Alan's LinkedIn post. One had been with the company for 8 years. The other had been Craig's most trusted account strategist. Both of them reached out to me separately. They didn't ask for anything specific. But I understood the message underneath each conversation. They were reading the situation carefully and making their decisions accordingly. Investors who followed the company's quarterly reports began asking public questions. A multi-million-dollar contract leaving a company without warning, even one framed as a mutual termination, attracts a particular kind of attention that is difficult to manage. The board scheduled an emergency review session for the end of that week. I was not in the room. I wasn't invited, and I didn't need to be. Meanwhile, Leon and I held our first real working session with the Harmon Group team. Not a pitch, an actual session. Campaign timelines. Budget structures. Quarterly growth targets laid out clearly on a shared document. We were not waiting for anything anymore. We were already building. I heard about the boardroom meeting through Kevin. He had a connection to one of the junior assistants on the board's administrative team, and what he passed along was enough to understand the shape of what had happened. The session had lasted nearly 3 hours and had not been a comfortable one. The board had been walked through a sequence of events: the formal termination letter from Harmon Group, the revenue decline data across 18 months, the record of unauthorized strategy overrides, and the timeline of internal decisions that had led directly to the account's departure. They had also reviewed the frantic emails Craig had sent in the hours following the Wednesday Zoom call, the ones that had largely gone unanswered. The evidence was presented in order. Client dissatisfaction emails. Documented overrides. A clear and traceable line from Craig's decisions to the loss of the company's most valuable contract. Craig had attended the meeting and offered his account of events. He had, reportedly, attempted once more to redirect the board's attention toward me, toward the idea that I had manipulated the situation from the outside. The board had listened. Then they asked him to step outside while they deliberated. I don't know exactly what was said in that room while he waited. But what came next told me everything I needed to know. Craig Holden resigned on a Thursday. There was no announcement. No press release. No statement from the company. His name simply disappeared, from the internal directory, from the company website, from the professional signature he had used for years. It was quiet. Deliberately quiet. No public scandal. No courtroom drama. No exposé published anywhere. Just a slow, careful erosion, of trust, of credibility, of the position he had spent years constructing and believed was permanent. I heard about it from Kevin, who heard it from someone in HR. The formal resignation had been submitted, and the company had accepted it quickly. Too quickly for it to have been anything other than a negotiated exit arranged behind closed doors. I thought about the conference room. The light laugh that had followed the words high-level clients need high-level minds. I thought about his voice on the recording, we trimmed some dead weight, and the people around him who had laughed along easily. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly. It wasn't the emotion I had expected to land on. It was something more like clarity. The kind that settles in when things resolve the way they should have resolved all along. 3 days later, Craig sent me a meeting request through email. I looked at it for a moment. Then I accepted it. The months that followed were full in a way I hadn't prepared for. Building something from the ground up is different from building inside someone else's structure. Every decision, every client call, every contract clause, every hire, carried a weight that felt real in a new way. Leon and I worked long hours, but they were our hours. The pressure was real, but so was the ownership behind it. 6 months after I had signed the partnership agreement at my kitchen table, we signed our second major client. A mid-sized firm that had been looking for a consultancy with a proven growth record. Leon handled the pitch. I built the strategy. We closed it in 2 meetings. By the end of our first year, the revenue we had generated together in a single quarter had surpassed what I used to earn in a full year at my previous company. I moved into a bigger apartment. Leon found us a proper office space, small, clean, and entirely ours. We had a sign made for the door. Blake and Foster Consultancy. There was a moment, standing in that office on the day we moved in the furniture, when I thought about the parking lot where I had sat on a Monday morning in January, staring at the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. A great deal had changed since then. A few months into our second year, I made our first hire. Her name was Amber. She had been on my team at the old company, one of the original analysts I had trained when she first joined as a junior. She was sharp, precise, and almost entirely underutilized in the role she had been stuck in since my departure. She reached out through a LinkedIn message. Professional and brief, asking if we had any openings. I called her back the same afternoon. We met for coffee on a Tuesday morning. She arrived with a notebook full of ideas. She had already mapped out 3 specific areas where she believed Blake and Foster had room to scale. I offered her the position before we finished our drinks. Her first week, she sat across from me at the conference table in our office and said something I hadn't forgotten since. "You were never replaceable," she said plainly. Everyone knew it. We just didn't say it out loud while he was still there. I thanked her. Then I slid the campaign brief for our newest client across the table and told her we had a deadline at the end of the month. There was work to do. Later that week, I read that my former company had announced a round of layoffs, nearly a dozen positions eliminated across 2 departments. He walked into our office on a Friday afternoon. I had been expecting it, not the visit exactly, but something like it. When Craig had sent that meeting request weeks earlier, I had understood that whatever he wanted to say couldn't be handled in an email thread. He looked different standing in our lobby. Not older, exactly, but smaller somehow. The way people look when the thing that had been holding them upright, the title, the authority, the unshakable belief that they were untouchable, gets quietly removed. He was dressed well. He had made an effort. But his posture had changed. He sat down across from me without being asked. I didn't offer anything. I didn't fill the silence with pleasantries or small talk. I just looked at him and waited. He glanced around the office slowly. At our name on the wall near the entrance. At Amber's organized desk in the corner. At the framed copy of the Harmon Group partnership agreement that Leon had suggested we hang, not as a trophy, he had said, but as a reminder of where we had started. Then Craig looked back at me. "I've been out of work for 2 months," he said. "I need something. Consulting. Freelance. Any kind of contract work." He paused. I was hoping you might have something here. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence sit for a moment, not to be cruel, but because some things deserve to land fully before they're answered. I looked at Craig across the desk. I thought about the conference room. The careful way he had positioned himself at the head of the table. The way he had scanned the room for an audience before he spoke. The casual laugh that had followed the words he had chosen so deliberately. High-level clients need high-level minds. I had turned those words over in my mind more times than I could count. In the parking lot on Monday morning. At my kitchen table the night I signed the partnership agreement. In the first real strategy session I had run with Alan Harmon's team after we made it official. I thought about what that moment in the conference room had cost me. And then I thought about where it had eventually led me. I looked at Craig steadily and evenly. We only hire elite operators, I said. The words landed exactly as I had intended them to. Not with anger behind them. Not with satisfaction. Just with the same flat calm he had once used when he said them to me. He sat with that for a moment. Then he nodded once, slowly. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out of the office without another word. I watched him go. Then I turned back to my work. In the months that followed, something shifted that I hadn't deliberately planned for. It happened the way most real things do, gradually, without a clear starting point. A conversation here, a referral there, a mention in an industry newsletter that picked up the Harmon Group story and framed it as a case study in client relationship management. Nobody wrote about the personal details. Nobody needed to. But professional circles are smaller than they appear, and information moves through them steadily. My name began appearing in conversations I wasn't part of. Potential clients mentioned hearing about our work before they ever reached out. Competitors referenced the Harmon account transition when discussing what a strong consultancy relationship actually looked like in practice. Craig's name appeared in different conversations. Not scornfully, not publicly, but in the careful way people speak around a name when someone's reputation has quietly come apart. People who had worked under him began choosing their words thoughtfully when his name came up. That particular kind of silence communicates more than any direct statement. Within the industry, the story had a shape that most people could read without being given the full version. A company had lost a major client. A consultancy had gained one. The real story lived somewhere in the space between those two facts. I had not set out to build a reputation. I had set out to do the work. One tends to follow the other, if you stay consistent long enough. 8 months after Craig had walked out of our office, he sent me an email. It wasn't long. There was no business framing, no professional preamble, no attempt to dress it up as anything other than what it simply was. He wrote that he had underestimated me. Not in the vague, carefully distanced way that people sometimes phrase regret, mistakes were made, lessons were learned, but directly. He used my name. He used his own. He said he had seen Harmon Group's latest earnings report, which had been strong. He said he had read about the second major client we had signed. He said he hoped the firm continued to grow the way it had been growing. And then he said he was sorry. Not for a specific list of things, he didn't go through everything item by item. But he said it plainly, without conditions attached. He wrote that he had made decisions based on his own insecurity rather than on what the facts in front of him were clearly showing. He said that was on him, and not on me. He didn't ask for a response. He didn't leave a number. He didn't suggest meeting. He just said what he had come to say and ended the email. I read it twice. Then I closed the window, opened the campaign brief sitting on my desk, and got back to work. 1 year after the Monday morning meeting, I drove past my old office building. It wasn't intentional. I was heading to a client lunch across town and the route carried me past that block. I recognized the building before I was fully ready to, the glass front, the lobby I had walked through hundreds of times, the row of parking spaces near the entrance where I had sat in my car that January morning, both hands on the wheel, breathing slowly and trying to hold myself steady. I didn't slow down. I didn't pull over. I just drove past. But for the few seconds that building filled my window, I thought about who I had been walking out of those doors. I had left with nothing concrete, no project, no title, no team, no plan. Just a phone buzzing in my pocket and 6 years of experience that no one could walk out behind me and take away. I thought about Alan Harmon, who had renewed our contract for another 2 years just the week before. He had said it simply over the phone, "You do what you say you're going to do." That's rarer than people realize. I thought about Amber. About Leon. About the office with our name on the wall beside the door. Then the building disappeared behind me, and I kept driving. There is something I have thought about often since all of this happened. Craig didn't lose because I fought him. He didn't fall because I spent my nights building some careful plan designed to bring him down. He lost because the truth was already there, it had always been there, and I had spent 6 years without fully realizing how much of it I had quietly documented, quietly built, and quietly earned. I was fired on a Monday morning. Walked out in front of my entire department. I handed over my badge while people found interesting things to look at on the table. By Friday, I had signed a partnership agreement. By the following Monday, Harmon Group had announced it publicly. By the end of that first year, we had 2 major clients, a growing team, and a firm with our name on the door. I didn't destroy Craig Holden. He had started that process long before I was ever involved. The ego that made him laugh when he fired me. The overconfidence that made him rewrite history in the same hour I was still sitting in the parking lot. The certainty that made him walk into a Wednesday Zoom call without checking what was waiting on the other side of it. All of it was his. All of it was always going to catch up with him eventually. I just made sure I wasn't standing in the way when it did. On Monday, I was fired in front of everyone. By Friday, I was the one signing contracts.